Good afternoon, and welcome to Leadership Lessons I Have Learned, a complimentary webinar from HealthSystemCIO.com, sponsored by Relay Health. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of HealthSystemCIO.com, and I will be your moderator today. We encourage you to ask questions. You can type them in as they occur to you in the Q&A box, the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and send them in. Leave the default set to all panelists, and we'll be looking at those and posing them later in the program. You can download the deck. You see the URL on your screen, and I'm going to send it out in the chat box just now. Also, there's a shortened URL at the bottom of all the slides, so you have plenty of chances to get that. And we are recording today's event. There'll be an archive ready within 2 business days, and you'll receive an email when it's ready, and a separate registration is required. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to hear from our good friend, my good friend, Chuck Christian, VP and CIO at St. Francis Hospital. Then we're going to hear from our sponsor, represented by Mitch Mitchell, VP of Federal Solutions with Relay Health. And then we're going to have a little Q&A with Chuck. So before further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck Christian. Chuck, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, great, Anthony. Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody today. I hope I have something interesting to say. We'll see in a few minutes. And when Anthony approached me about speaking on the topic about leadership, the fact that I'm originally from Alabama, and everybody knows in Alabama, football is kind of a second religion, I really couldn't pass up a chance to tie the building of a winning team with leadership and coaching. So that's what we're going to kind of do today, and I hope that by the end of the session, in about 2 or 3 hours, I'm just kidding, Anthony, you can wake up now, that we'll have some really good topics to cover. But leadership is really something I think that I know a little something about, having been a healthcare CIO for 25 plus years, and in healthcare for a little over 40. I know I started when I was 2.5. So one of the things that you'll understand is being a healthcare CIO makes you age very rapidly. But I also have 4 adult daughters, which also will make you age very rapidly. And so I'm not really sure which is the tougher job, being a healthcare CIO or being the father of 4 daughters. But I think the skills are both the same that are required. They both require a great deal of patience and money. So if you know, there's been a lot been written about coaching and leadership and what they have in common. But when you think about it, I really believe that they really do. And so because you're taking action to help a person or persons to be his or her very best. And both of these, coaching and leadership, they create the spark of self-recognition in others. Now, I know that some may disagree with my approach with this, but if you read Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, it really starts on having the right players in the field or the right people in the bus. And we as leaders and coaches are nothing without the great people that we call our teams. Now, there's going to be a lot of football comparisons that you're going to see, and I'm not really going to read the slides to folks. I know that Anthony's going to make these available to folks after the fact, and I'm just going to give you some other stuff along the way. But remember, I was raised in Alabama, and so I know, but I'm not an Alabama fan. I'm actually an Auburn fan, which is the University of Alabama, and I apologize to all my Alabama brothers out there. And sisters. So I'm also sure that many of you have seen some great quotes that are from very effective leaders and coaches. And there's a lot of them out there, and we're going to see a lot of those throughout the conversation we're going to have today. These first ones are from Ken Blanchard and Doug Shula. They actually wrote a book called The Little Book of Coaching. These gentlemen did an excellent job of comparing and contrasting their 2 different areas of expertise, and that first quote is from their combined work. And I highly recommend it if anybody is looking for some quotable stuff related to football and business. The second one I've known for quite some time, and I'm reminded that President Eisenhower was a soldier first and an officer before he was president. And I have no doubt that being a general calls for an artful approach to both leadership and coaching. I know it does in raising daughters. So the other thing, too, is you'll see that there's a lot of terms, that football terms, that actually wind up in the boardroom. You know, the two tie together very, very nicely, and there's a lot of blended terms. And these terms and phrases work very well in both settings, particularly if you're in a business meeting about the next strategies and that kind of stuff. You'll hear things about, well, we're going to end run around the competition, or let's see, what's your game plan? But so in both, it's all about building the right team for the right job and moving that ball or the business down the field. Now, I'll mention a few coaches during the course of the presentation and as we continue our conversation, but I really couldn't find a better of an example of a coach and leader than John Wooden. Now, ESPN named John Wooden the coach of the century. He has some really impressive stats to back that title up. He coached for 41 years, and while at UCLA, he had 10 NCAA national championships in 12 years, and he had 4 perfect seasons. But now when, you know, unfortunately Coach Wooden is gone, but when he was asked about his record, he basically discounts the claim. He said that excellence, building character, and being an example as a leader and a teacher trumped winning any day. And I think that's a good example of a great leader. So keep these comments in mind, and I'll refer back to them a little later on in the presentation in 10 or 20 slides. So I'm sure that many of you know the story that's behind the list that's on this slide on the screen. John Wooden's father presented him with a card when he graduated from elementary school. And on it, his father had written his own personal 7-point creed. Now, I can't help but believe that Coach Wooden took his father's gift to heart and incorporated those into his life and his coaching and leadership style. At least the gentleman that he appeared to be on the court and off the court sure focuses on that. And so Coach Wooden exhibited many of the characteristics of a great coach and a great leader. But he was also, most of all, a great example. So over the course of the next little bit, now that's an Alabama term of time measurements, a little bit, we're going to explore a little bit more about the business leader as a coach. I've also had several quotes from other great leaders, and I found this one to be helpful in my career. So, and I consider the ones I'm going to share with you part of what is my own personal career coaching that I kind of do for myself and for others. And there's another one that I'm going to share with you in just a second that resides gently tucked under the glass corner of my desk, and it's actually from Secretary Colin Powell. And I think this is really important to help us remind that when you're in charge, your job is not to make everyone happy, but it's to do the right thing for the right reasons. Now, companies are really a reflection of the people that perform the work. But it's the people who reflect those that lead them. Let me say that again. It's the companies that reflect the people that perform the work, but the people in the company reflect those that lead them. It's the same in football. The business leader as coach has the opportunity to inspire his team and change the way that they feel about coming into work or stepping on the field. To put a bounce in their step and instill a desire to do a great job every day or every game. There are many attitudes about being a great leader and a coach, and we as leaders can set that attitude every day. Yeah, I know that the list on the slide is a little corny, but bear with me, and I'll see if I can connect the dots a little bit better. So let's start really at the top with communication. Yeah, I have a tendency sometimes to get a little preachy, so I'll ask Anthony to, if I do, to flag me down, and I'll pull over to the curb, and we'll move on. But for many, if not all of our organizations, we all have great mission, vision, and value statements. But I'll bet you'll find them hanging on the walls and on your websites. However, the question is, do the people that make up your team and your workforce really know what these are? Have they incorporated into how they do their jobs every day? And do they, as members of your team, know how they contribute to the success of that mission, vision, and values? And I'm sure that many of your senior leadership, as mine in the organization, think so, or at least they hope so. So let me share a little piece of a personal journey that we had back when I was at Good Samaritan. We had a brand new CEO, and he'd actually been in the chair for a little over 2 years, but he was an 18-year employee at the organization. He was a CFO before that. And so as we changed the new leadership, we changed the direction of the organization, and so we created a new mission, vision, statements, and we made a minor revision of our values, nothing big. And I think the CEO thought we had done a really good job of getting the word out, both internally and externally. The new statements were hanging everywhere. They were on our intranet, they were on the internet, but it really wasn't enough. The team needed to understand not only the words that were contained in the mission and vision statements, but they needed to understand how they contributed to that. And so we worked a little bit harder and did a little bit different about communicating to that. So we learned as senior leadership thought we were doing a really good job about getting the word out, but we realized that that really wasn't the case, and we needed to ingrain those words into the culture of the organization. And so the conversations with the team need to be consistent, constant, and continuous. All the members of senior leadership need to have the same message. We also need to help the folks in the team understand how their role, how they participate in their role as the success of the organization. It's not enough for them to be able just to recite the mission and vision. They need to know how it impacts them and how they impact the organization. So it's leadership's job to coach them to success. And our job is to set the direction and to communicate it fully with the team. Now, I know this quote may appear a little contrary to my remark about getting the word out, but communication is not unidirectional. In order to fully communicate, we need to listen and learn to listen well and carefully. So according to Socrates, we need to listen about twice as much as we speak. That's something that I need to be reminded of a lot. One thing I've had to learn is active listening. I need to learn to hear the message of what was being said, not listening to formulate a rebuttal or make a remark about what was said. So if we're getting the word out, we're communicating with the team, we will be given the opportunity to provide those coaching moments, but what we need to do is we really need to listen for those coaching moments as they're presented to us. The other thing that we need to look at is football, is what do football coaches do in the off season? Now, I think many of us think they may go duck hunting or fishing, but that's really not true. I had a good friend back in Indiana that was a high school football coach. He had a great record. He's now retired, but I know that for a fact that he's spent most of his time in the summer of working and looking at the past season, what went well, what didn't go so well. They're looking at game plans they had last year and working to determine what the needs were changed, what young men graduated from the school and which ones were coming on. You just can't throw these things together. They spent the summer crafting new plans, and so do professional football coaches as well, and college coaches. So I'm sure that each one of our organizations have a strategic plan, but I'm betting your plan is far more, and betting is another Southern term. It's actually betting for all my other friends out there like Anthony. So I'm betting that your plan is far more complex and flexible than it was 20 years ago or 5 years ago for that matter. I've been in healthcare all my adult life, and from my experience, the plans and the planning processes have changed a great deal over that course of time. So the same can be said for football. In the past, the coach, could establish an overall plan that would take advantages of his team's strengths and limit the exposure to their weaknesses. Then craft a plan for each one of the opponents that they'd see on the field with a handful of plays that would be varied. But with the complexity that we see on the field today, the game has to be more fluid and flexible for the team to be successful. And I'm kind of thinking, Peyton Manning, when he was at the Colts and now at Denver, he gets up to the line, he looks at the field out there, then he will actually change the play at the moment before he gets the snap. So changing the play right before the ball is snapped has become more the norm rather than exception. And I think that really the same can be said about healthcare. How many of you know how our markets will look like in the next 3 to 6 months? The the winds of change in Washington, blow pretty strong, and so we're really not sure exactly what the regulators are doing or how they're going to behave next week. So having a very solidified multi-year plan that's set in stone is an approach, but I'd like to suggest it has limited opportunity for success, and so we have to create more flexibility in what we're doing. No, and it's really not easy, and I'll refer back to that previous topic of communication. It really plays a key role in making sure that team members understand what the strategic plan is and how their role is in that success, and if changes need to be made, why, and how they're going to be impacted and how they can help the success of the organization. And that we also, as leaders, need to be willing to point out when our teams are not performing against that plan. We need to provide those coaching opportunities. I'm reminded that when the performance that we accept is what we teach, and so we provide examples for the other members of the team. So I fully believe that we have to have the right people in place. We have to have high expectations for ourselves and our teams, and then we need to provide the tools that they need, and then we need to communicate that plan successfully on a bidirectional plane. Then we'll have a great recipe for success. The one important thing about putting a plan in place is executing against the plan. Once we've got that plan in place and we've got it tuned in, don't second guess the plan. If you expect your team to execute against that plan, be sure that you as a leader and as a coach have full faith and confidence that that plan is solid. Now, I'm sure when Charles Lindbergh, flew out across the Atlantic, he thought, what the heck am I doing? While he was flying across in the plane. Now, he had a plan and he stuck to it. He didn't second guess his options. When he was out there, he was out there. But I'm sure he also had a plan in case he had to ditch the plane in the ocean, thankfully one that he didn't have to execute. Now, Winston Churchill also had a quote that says, make no small plans. They lack the magic to stir men's soul. Now, I'm not suggesting that a plan has to be bold and unattainable, but I think any plan needs to cause us to stretch, to reach beyond our current limits and use the combined talents of our teams. Now, I'm reminded of another quote that's not on the slide here, that attitude equals altitude. This one that I heard a long time ago. I don't remember when I heard this quote, but it really means a lot to me, and it means that I have the opportunity to fully participate in the outcome of what I do. Now, there's also one of my most favorite quotes at the bottom of the screen, and it comes from one of my really favorite movies, and it's one of my favorite movies because I was in high school at this very same time that the time frame that this took place. And I can relate to the tensions that were existing during that time in our history. But it's one of my favorites because it illustrates what a team can do when there's a plan in place and leadership creates the opportunity for great things to happen. It also reminds me that the individual's attitude is key, and how they incorporate those team's goals will really, in a long way, lead to the success of that team. We have to be that team. And every member of that team has to be willing to give their very best during each play for the team to execute the established plan and live into our mission, vision, and values. Now, I mentioned I had 4 daughters. My number 3 daughter was a track star in middle and high school. There were 3 relay teams and a cross-country team that she ran on that set school records that still stand more than 10 years from later. And she and the girls were really no more talented than the girls they competed against, but they really wanted it more because the high school had never had any records like that before. But they wanted it not for themselves, but for the school and for the rest of the team. And, each member of the team had to do their very best and sometimes do more than their best to make that team successful. If one of them didn't have the right attitude, then all of them would fail. And I have to say, Katie is a now very successful social worker in New Albany, Indiana, and she makes a difference with that same winning attitude every day. And I have another daughter. My wife and I learned that our number 2 daughter had a couple of learning disabilities when she was in 2nd and 3rd grade. And she could have used either one of those as a crutch and as a source of excuse for poor academic performance. But I'm very proud to say that her attitude about the challenges that she encountered helped her through those tough times And today Beth is a well-respected first-grade teacher and reading recovery teacher in Rushville, Indiana school system. She's actually visiting me this week. Now, the thing about it is that a lot of folks will say that a W is a W, but, you know, I also know that folks have to have that desire to have the correct attitude. And with the folks with the right attitude will have more W's, more check marks in the W column than in the L column. But there's also a huge difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. Sometimes the outcome is the same, but I bet you that many of you have sent on Sunday or Monday night or Thursday night, you've watched the NFL, and when the teams, you can tell the teams that are playing to lose, they play too conservatively. And how many teams have we watched when they do that, they wind up losing their lead because their other opponents are playing to win. So the win typically goes to the folks that really don't take the conservative approach, and they're playing to win. So I recommend that for everyone on the phone today. So let's look at the other C in coach. It's about being consistent. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to respond the same way all the time, but what it really means is you need to respond the same way in similar circumstances. And if you remember from one of the previous slides, and I didn't call it out, but there was a bullet that stated that a river without banks is nothing but a large puddle. So we as leaders and coaches have to provide the consistency in message and action that will establish the boundaries for our team and the members. I think we're all feeling the rush of change and the increased urgency in what's expected of us today, particularly in healthcare. And some days I think the only consistency in healthcare is really that constant rate of change. So, but being a great coach means being present, being visible and approachable, constantly providing appropriate feedback and creating opportunities to gather feedback from the team. So it's the same thing but repeated over and over again. So being a coach not only means being consistent with the message and with communications, but being consistent with the consequences related to performances, good or bad. And remember, what you accept, you teach. This is another great quote that I try to remember each day. It's what goes unsaid that speaks the loudest about who I am. Now, there's another great quote that I think it was Rachel Dawes' famous quote to Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins. It says, "It's not who you are underneath, it's what you do that defines you." And I think that's a very, very important part for us to remember as leaders and coaches. And for me, it's the characteristic of a great leader and a coach that bridges the gap between what we say and what we do. In the book, I mentioned earlier, Good to Great by Jim Collins, he established a principle of a level 5 leader. And during the research of the book, Jim and his team interviewed a lot of CEOs of companies that met the criteria that they had for great companies. And without fail, when asked why their companies had such a remarkable track record with good decisions, they all mentioned they were lucky or just blessed. None of them took credit for the great success that their companies had experienced. Remember how Coach Wooden responded when asked about his accomplishments? Rather than take the credit, he referred to other events and activities beyond himself. And Jim proposed a pattern, what he called the window and the mirror. The level 5 leaders look out the window to apportion credit for factors outside themselves when things really go well. And if they can't find a specific person or event to give credit to, they just credit it with good luck. And at the same time, they look in the mirror to apportion responsibility, never blaming bad luck or when things go bad. They actually blame themselves. So when Jim and his team was asked to list out some of the characteristics of a level 5 leader, Jim put personal humility at the top of the list. And I've found through my career that honesty and humility is not something you can fake, at least not for long. So I'm reminded every day that it's what we do that it finds who we really are. This is another quote that I don't really know who the author is, but you know, reading it over the last few slides, I realized that I may sound like I'm a little paranoid, but I had this sense of being watched. And if you don't, you really should, because I've learned that as a coach and a leader in the industry and my organization, I'm never not at work. My team is watching me, whether, you know, and how I handle and manage myself in all kinds of settings, you know, whether I show up and how I engage with other members of the team. Now, one of the things I learned way back in PowerPoint Presentation 101, other than how to be boring but with great graphics, is that my job as a speaker and a presenter is to tell my audience what I'm going to say it, and then tell them what I said, or at least what I hope I said. So I'm not sure that I've accomplished the first two, but I've got this great summary slide here. So I'm certain that each of you can think of business leaders or coaches that fit all these characteristics I have listed, and probably a few more. And I've had the opportunity and the pleasure and privilege to work with many and still do today outstanding leaders. And all the great leaders and coaches that I've observed, there's that watching thing again, have been excellent at picking the right people and getting them in the right seat on the bus. They were skillful at working to establish a solid game plan and vision. They had the communication skills and the consistency to make sure that everyone was on board with what needed to be accomplished and within what time frames. They also had the discipline to work through the plan and the personal humility to realize that it takes everyone on that team to be successful. Now, this is one final quote that I'm going to leave you for today, and I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to give you some of my thoughts and share some of my own personal inner coaching quotes that I use every day to help me do a couple of things. One, keep me humble and let me understand that I need to be the example that I want my team to be, but I also need to be careful and understand that it's what I do that really truly defines me, not what I say. So, Anthony, thanks you and Kate very much for the opportunity for me to be able to share today.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck. You know, I always enjoy learning from you and chatting with you, and this was no exception. I look forward to a little Q&A. Now we're going to hear from our sponsor, represented by Mitch Mitchell, VP of Federal Solutions with Relay Health. Mitch, over to you.
Thank you, Anthony. I really appreciate it. Chuck, great job. Great to hear your voice again. Very informative, very inspirational. I really appreciate you taking the time to pull this together. I just want to take a couple of minutes and, again, thank everyone for their time this morning for participating in this and talk a little bit about complex environments and the opportunities that those create for leaders to affect change within their organizations. But from our perspective, really it's in support of supporting our customers in affecting change within their organizations. Over the last decade or more, we've seen unprecedented change in the healthcare industry, specifically around the adoption of technologies and the implementation of those technologies. You all on the phone have experienced that more so than most across the country, and I think you can all appreciate the challenges associated with managing that change both within your organizations. Relay Health has been supporting organizations that have been going through this change since 1999. And I, in my capacity, have been working since 2009 with a very complex organization, the Military Health System, as they have embarked on changing their model of care toward a more patient-centric model of care. And I just want to share briefly with you some of the strategies and techniques that organizationally we try to employ and instill within our organization to support our customers in affecting change within their organizations and being successful in implementing that change. Some of you may be familiar with John Kotter, who was a professor at Harvard Business School. He published a book a number of years ago on leading change. And this slide really outlines sort of the 8 characteristics that leaders employ in supporting change within their organizations. And all great leaders do these things, and they do these things in a very specific order. And I wanted to share this with you because organizationally, we too try to employ these techniques and these strategies in supporting our customers and helping them lead change within their organizations through the use and implementation of technologies that we or other organizations may be providing. And really, it's creating that sense of urgency. Now, in some cases, the federal government helps to create that for us, as we've seen with meaningful use and other programs and incentives that the government has put forth. But creating that sense of urgency is really one of the key things as a leader that we can do in helping to affect change within our organizations. It's also important to develop a powerful guiding coalition within the organization to help drive that change within the organization, to create that vision and to communicate that vision clearly up and down the organization, and to empower others to take action around that vision, and to define short-term wins and track those wins and consolidate those improvements as you move through that change process, and institutionalize this approach going forward so that you can create a culture of change within the organization where you've got buy-in. Great leaders do these things. Great leaders do these things in these orders. And we help our customers to support change in their organization by employing these techniques both inside of our organization and outside. You know, one of the key things we really want to focus on, and Chuck, you did a great job, I think, of emphasizing this throughout your presentation, is the importance of communication and the ability to communicate that vision to somebody inside that organization in a succinct and clear way. And not just being able to communicate it, but to do so in a way that there's recognition of understanding and interest. And until that occurs, it's really hard to drive that change. One of the things we do consistently across organization and working with our customers and our clients is to help guide them in articulating that vision within their organization to help streamline the way in which this change can take place. So for a number of years now, we've become no stranger to leading change in complex environments. We've always strived to become a trusted resource for our health system customers, and not just large integrated delivery networks, but even small community practices, and from our perspective in our Federal Solutions Group, amongst those leaders within military treatment facilities, branch clinics, and community-based medical homes that are deployed across the country and really around the world, where we're working with leaders within each one of those organizations to help them institute change in their organization, which over the last few years has really been to drive greater patient-centeredness within the military health system that Relay Health has been pleased to support over these last few years. One of the last concepts I want to leave you with is this notion of servant leadership and strategies associated with servant leadership. This is a philosophy that I have come to be very familiar with over the last few years, and it's a philosophy that we try to employ inside of our organization, and it speaks very much to much of what Chuck was talking about earlier. This notion of servant leaders really leading by example and making values-based decisions. Internally in our organization, as many of you know, McKesson Corporation has a set of guiding values and principles that we all try to strive to live by. We call them ICARE, integrity, customer first, accountability, respect, and excellence that drive our behaviors as an organization. We seek to build highly productive teams and mentor, develop, and inspire those that are our colleagues and those working below us. Servant leaders are critical thinkers. Servant leaders see the world through a very strategic lens. They strive for daily personal improvement, but more importantly, and I think we can all appreciate this working in the industry that we do, we seek to improve the community we serve, the healthcare community and those patients that are served by that healthcare community. And this is not a new philosophy. This servant leadership philosophy has been around for centuries. Here's a quote that I found that I felt as though really solidifies this notion of servant leadership. And I'd like the last portion of this quote especially is to recognize that great leaders know that the diamond in the rough is always found in the rough, and that it's hard work as a leader to really cultivate and build great and high-performing teams. I want to leave you with one last quote from a gentleman that I had the pleasure of meeting when I was at the Army War College participating in a national security seminar a number of years ago. A gentleman by the name of Murph Clark provided me with this quote, which is, "Lives of ease are rarely lives of great meaning. The two rarely intersect. And the biographies of our heroes and saints and soldiers teach us this. And you must understand that the work we are doing and the sacrifices that we are making are meaningful. So please do not wish for a life of ease. And that was from a Air Force Colonel Murph Clark. So with that, Anthony, I want to thank you again. Chuck, I want to thank you. I really enjoyed listening to your words today. And with that, Anthony, I'll turn it back to you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mitch. Thanks for supporting this event today. Well, now we have some time for Q&A. And so, as I mentioned, go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box, right-hand corner of your screen. Leave the default set to all panelists, and I will pose those to Chuck. So, Chuck, excellent presentation. Great topic. I guess a good place to start is, and you actually did a webinar with us about this topic with Sue Shade a while ago, a year ago. Having an opportunity for a new start as a leader to take everything you'd learned over the years and bring it there without any of the legacy mistakes you may have made at the beginning. Any thoughts there as to sort of that greenfield opportunity for leadership and anything you were able to do differently than you'd done earlier in your career?
Well, I mean, I appreciate it, Anthony. I think that, you know, what I've learned over the course of many years is one size doesn't fit all. I mean, you know, part of my first career, I was a radiologic technologist, and I moved up into management, and, you know, I had a leadership role in that as well. And, you know, I was able to take a few of the things, but most of the things I took with me to other leadership roles is about interpersonal skills, and it's about understanding how, you know, the work gets done through other people. And it doesn't, they don't do it because I tell them to. It's because, you know, then it really truly is work. What I attempted to do, and I try to do every day, is participate in the work. I roll my sleeves up, and I'll get right down to it, and I'm there to help. And I've had the pleasure of working with some great teams. You know, my team back in Indiana, we worked together for 24 years, and so I grew to appreciate them more as family than I did as you know, people that we did the stuff together. The other thing I remembered was, I may have the title, but I'm not the boss. You know, a lot of the guys that do what I do consider themselves, you know, the quarterback, and to use another football analogy. But you know, kind of the position that I feel like I've always played is the one of center, is because the people that really know what they're doing are the ones I'm going to hand the ball to, and then I'm going to run interference for them to actually get the work done. And so I need to participate fully in that and help them be successful. That's kind of what I view my role in.
You had mentioned during your presentation, I think it was the Colin Powell quote about you can't be afraid of let's use the phrase, pissing people off.
Yeah.
So if you have a conflict-averse personality and you don't like that, and I've worked for bosses that had that, and when you are like that, the environment, problems fester. Nothing gets taken care of, nothing gets resolved. I just want some more of your thoughts around that. I mean, nobody wants to be, you know, the bully. You don't want to be running around overbearing and aggressive, but like you said, your job is not to just have no conflicts and have everybody be smiling and happy. So just talk about that conflict in a leader.
Well, sure. You know, it's been my experience that folks that never make anybody unhappy really aren't doing anything. You know, when they never make when you don't make any mistakes, or if you don't do anything, you have less a chance of making mistakes, but you also have zero chance of accomplishing anything. I think that, you know, we're going to be human. I think that that's the reason that we have the teams that we have. We want to bring those conversations together, and you know, when you bring people together, there is going to be conflict, and as we as good leaders, we can manage that conflict. And there are going to be times that we just have to agree to disagree. I mean, I think folks that have worked with me will, you know, say, I hope that, you know, I take all the information in. If we make a decision, if it's not a popular decision, but it is the right one. It's kind of like the planning slide. We have to have a plan. We have to execute the plan. We can't second guess the plan. And But we also have to create the opportunities for folks on your team and outside the team to raise their hand and be dissenters, because that brings in, additional thought into the process, because, we can't know all the details. I mean, I'll use we're doing a process redesign in our emergency room here. And, there's been a lot of thought put into, what needs to be done. And it wasn't until we put the latest group and team together that we're actually seeing success. And we've had a lot of people agree and disagree and get a little pissed off about, because, when you're implementing change, you have some folks that just don't, take it well. And, you have your early adopters and you have the laggards. They don't want some people just don't want to change. So you're going to have that from time to time.
Leadership is fun, as we said, when everything's going well. You set your vision, you get your buy-in, you get folks on the team, you have the right folks, you get them in the right position, maybe you move some folks around to get them re-energized. When people are not performing, you coach them, you try and explain why things are being done a certain way. But I would imagine most people would agree that the least pleasant part of leadership is a separation, knowing when the person doesn't belong on the bus. I'm sure you've had those in your career, and I wonder if for the folks on the line who may be on the borderline with an employee, how could you coach them through evaluating whether or not it's the end of the road?
Well, that truly is a tough one, and sometimes you have to make the decision for them. When I'm an individual that likes to salvage folks and help them, find success in what they're doing, with the understanding is that, we all can't be superstars, and that the talents, various talents will make up different components of the team, and it's the fact that the team needs to be successful. But it's also like, in many of the leadership books, you need to be on the right bus, you need to be in the right seat, and if folks are not in the right bus, you need to help them, one, determine that, and help them be successful by moving either to another seat or to another bus. And there's really no one prescription, if you will, that will help in that process. You have to get to know the individual, and you have to understand what the rationale for their performance is, and that goes back to this active listening. You have to listen to what is said and what is not being said, so you can understand and help them through whatever it is. It's something maybe going on in their lives that is having a very negative impact. I mean, when you work with folks a long time, you're going to go through cycles, and I'm also reminded that we have families. I raise 4 daughters, and as I keep mentioning, and I do take sympathy cards. No, I'm just kidding. I love my girls. I mean, there are things that will impact people's work performance, and we have to understand what those are, and we have to sometimes support people through those challenges of their life. I mean, you can't be on all the time. There are going to be times that each one of us are going to slip. And that's the other thing that, when you have high-performing teams, is that if you have one member that's kind of slipping a little bit, the rest of the members will step up and the team will be successful.
Right, and so there is certainly a component of it to maybe they're just having a bad day, and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and without prying into their personal lives, which leads me to what I think will be our last question based on time. For example, George Washington, I've read biographies on George Washington. He was known for intentionally keeping a distance from folks, and because he felt that was a requirement for him to be respected. So he kept people sort of at arm's length in a very formal manner. I've interviewed many CIOs, and we've seen CIOs that, I mean, seem to suggest there's no limit, and that the good leader will be arm in arm with their employees. What are your thoughts around what's an appropriate relationship for a leader with their staff and followers?
Well, I mean, I think that, and that's kind of a really slippery slope, and I think it kind of depends on, the organization, the work environment. We have to be very careful about what kind of relationships we have with folks that we work with every day, and they're collegial, and I'll use my team here and the team I had in Indiana. It's like I mentioned that we were a lot like family, and that meant that we did argue, we did disagree, but we didn't go out on Friday evening and have a beer, and there was no partying together and those type of things, and that wasn't done because there was a defined barrier or anything. I mean, I go out and play golf. I used to play golf with my boss, and I enjoyed it. And we spent a lot of time talking about work and individuals, but we've known each other for about 20 years as well. So you create those friendships. But I think that we have to be conscious of the fact, as I mentioned in one of the slides, is that we as leaders, we are being observed. It's not to make everybody paranoid, but just make us all aware, is that there is, great wisdom in, what you do speaks much louder than what you say. And so I think we have to lead by an example and be cautious about how we go about and manage our own self personally every day.
Well, and I think that's a perfect place to wind up, especially with holiday season coming up and company parties, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe we've saved some folks some career-ending embarrassment. But I want to thank you so much, Chuck. Really appreciate the presentation and the wisdom today. I want to thank Mitch Mitchell and Relay Health for sponsoring and making the event possible. As I mentioned, you'll receive an email when our archive recording is ready, and a separate registration is required. If you're a CHIME CIO holder and you've asked us to communicate your attendance to CHIME, we'll do that. If not, please make sure to communicate it yourself. Attending our webinars gets you 1 CEU for each event. Questions, comments, please contact me and go to our website to see our past 12 months and upcoming events. Well, with that, again, I want to thank Chuck and Mitch and everyone and our attendees, and everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.